Hello, welcome to the video. John Bodine here with Redemptive Psych. And in this video, we're going to be exploring the personality type of Joseph in the Bible. This is Old Testament Joseph. This is the Joseph who was the favorite amongst brothers, who was framed for an accidental death, sold off into slavery, and eventually, after he was enslaved, imprisoned, worked his way up to become a high overseer in Egypt. Now, when we're looking at a biblical character or an archaic character and trying to figure out their type, it depends on how far in the past they are, but it becomes more difficult to type them for certain, meaning that we can't, it's hard to use all of the vectors of communication and interaction when you're reading a somewhat obscure text that captures this person who existed long ago. Now, I still believe we can talk meaningfully about a person's psychology, and in many of these cases be very confident in their type, but there's still room for interpretation. How do you interpret the facts that are presented to you? Joseph, his story exists in Genesis 37 to 50, in about a 12, 13 chapter window there, which is pretty long for an Old Testament person. He has quite the story, quite the epic. And if you read that, I shared a little bit about he was born as the youngest into the family. Jacob was his father. He has many, many brothers. And the brothers don't like him a lot because because Joseph is the favorite. He is beloved by his father. He is probably given special privileges. He is regarded as a treasure by his father. And the other brothers don't necessarily feel that way. And Jacob tells them this dream, these two dreams that basically symbolize the brothers bowing down before Joseph. And at some point, the brothers have enough. They want to kill him. One of their brothers, Reuben, says, we're not going to kill him. Let's sell him off into slavery. They take his coat of many colors, tear it up, cover it with blood, and present that as if Joseph was murdered by an animal. And then Joseph goes off to slavery, to imprisonment, and many other things before he finally emerges as a leader, as an overseer in Egypt. So reading the story, I picked out a few traits, a few roles, a few characteristics that strike me as very important if you want to type Joseph. Now, the first one is dream interpretation, dream interpreter. Throughout his whole story, there is this powerful gift he has, dream interpretation. What is that? What is that related to with the psychology? What function, what types are more gifted with dream interpretation? Then management and authority. There is also a pattern everywhere he goes. Joseph does very well. He gains authority. He gets these managerial responsibilities. When he goes to Potiphar's house after he's sold off, Potiphar's this Egyptian guy with some power. Eventually, he becomes like an overseer of the house. He's put in charge of the house, of the workings of the house. When he's imprisoned a little bit later, after Potiphar's wife accuses Joseph of harassment, of sexual harassment, even though she was the one instigating that, and he runs away, but it looks like he did something. He's sent to prison, and even in prison, he's given some responsibility. He's given some control and influence over the other prisoners. Then after that, after he's done with prison, he's put into Pharaoh's cabinet, basically, and then given authority there, and then given a lot of authority after he interprets Pharaoh's dream. So dream interpretation and this pattern of being a great manager, of having lots of responsibility, of having authority and influence, these are two of his very prominent and powerful traits that exist throughout his entire story. Then the next one is enduring. He is patient. We don't get the impression that after he's been sold off into slavery, after years pass, after being imprisoned, Joseph is enslaved, imprisoned, he is uncomfortable, and yet he endures. And he doesn't seem to have a lot of resentment. I don't see a lot of evidence in the chapters that he is like this vindictive, bitter person. It seems like he endures patiently. So he's very patient, very enduring. And then last, the trait which kind of encapsulates some of this stuff, multiple of the other traits, is visionary. He is looking towards the future. This is in part his dream interpretation. He's aware of what is to come, at least as he's given clarity over the meaning of his dreams. So he's a future-oriented person, at least within the context of dreams and his management, but perhaps even beyond that. Moving on to interpreting these traits. Now, if we just go straight down the list of those 4 traits and you interpret them very explicitly, we can get down to 1 or 2 types right away. Dream interpretation. What function, what types are going to be more natural at dream interpretation? Dream interpretation is itself a function usually of extroverted intuition. It is, what is the vision that you had? What is it? Okay, I see that vision, I feel that vision. What are the interpretations of that? Symbolic decoding is a trait that extroverted intuition excels at. If you are into dream interpretation, it's usually the extroverted function acting in some capacity. Joseph has that as a constant trait. He's having these dreams, he can interpret dreams like that, and it's a constant theme throughout the story, which means that's extroverted intuition, likely high extroverted intuition. So he's probably one of the NP types just off the bat. Okay, management and authority. What function, what element is attributed to that? It could be a few things. It could be a few different kinds of profiles. However, extroverted thinking as a function is external order. It is managing and acting decisively with the world around me, putting things into order, into the categories of how they need to be, organizing, splitting things up. When he goes to Pharaoh later and interprets Pharaoh's dreams, 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, he begins to prepare to gather food in the way that he needs to, so that the whole world at that time basically is not going to starve to death. And Joseph demonstrates these very administrative abilities. Okay, that needs to go there, we need that much, we need this much, this is the order of things. That is a symbol of extroverted thinking. Now, as a function of extroverted thinking, they can manage things well. But as a social element, extroverted thinkers like to be in charge to some extent, like to have some authority. Joseph is exhibiting extroverted thinking throughout his managerial and the positions of influence that he has. Now, he's not exactly a king. He's not like a dictator. He's a manager, a little more like middle management-ish. So that's a different kind of leadership than like an ENTJ who can be in charge of a whole country. He's in charge of his area. He's in charge of managing the areas that he's given power over. And then enduring, to endure patiently, is a function is an attribute closely associated with introverted sensing. To be able to last, to endure, to be patient. To me, that seems like either an SI hero, like an ISJ, or an SI child, an INP. Likely, we're just talking about likelihood here, but then we combine all these vectors and then we get something. So if we combine these, dream interpretation, extroverted intuition, and sometimes extroverted thinking too. Okay, what is the frame of mind? What do these symbols mean to you? But particularly extroverted intuition. Likely high extroverted intuition. Joseph is likely an NP just off the bat there with his dream interpreting ability. Management authority, likely TE. Okay, so if he's an NE and TE user, that means he's either an NFP or an STJ. And if he's a high NE user, meaning any hero or any parent, mixed with TE, he has to be an INFP or an ENFP. Okay, then we talked about enduring and being a visionary. Both ENFPs and INFPs can endure and are visionaries, though the INFP has an inborn natural capacity to endure a little bit better, to be a little more patient with introverted sensing child. Now, management and authority, I'm going to return to this. We're talking about extroverted thinking. Between the INFP and the ENFP, INFPs tend towards management more. Those lower functions, SI and TE, them being more about quality control, them being a little more consistent than ENFPs usually. INFPs are more likely to be in those more management roles. It's not impossible for an ENFP, but it's less likely. So now we have to get down to some other vectors. Is he initiating? Is he responding? Is he a little more chaotic? Does he get things going? Does he keep things more steady? You can make different arguments. I don't see any evidence of him being like a get things going type like the ENFP. Joseph does not seem very chaotic to me. He seems controlled. He seems steady. And he seems more about quality and the consistency rather than chasing something new. His extroverted intuition seems constrained. What is coming? How do we avoid that? That could be extroverted intuition parent. I believe it is extroverted intuition parent. How do we avoid the coming apocalypse? Let us prepare now to avoid that in the future. That is more the INFP's way of dealing with the future. So with all that being said, I believe Joseph to be an INFP who has some more managerial capacity than some of the INFPs who are like crazy artists and very neurotic. He seems a little more stable, a little more of a management-minded type of INFP who's still very aware of the future. So that's Joseph, who I believe is an INFP, and hope you guys enjoy. Thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.